you don't need sugar and Gatorade and all this sports foods crap to exercise even at the high level and perform at the high level. Unsupported from California in the summer of 2014, rowing from California to Hawaii, which is it's about 2,400 nautical miles. It was 45 days and 3 hours. The 16 to 18 hours a day that we were rowing each day for 45 days. It's about the same amount of work in terms of calories burned as running 2 marathons each day. So we wanted to show that you can do that much work at a high level with absolutely no sugar and carbs, really, for almost 2 months nonstop.
And we are live. Sami, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me as a guest.
I'm excited to be chatting with you, man. So you are the head honcho at Virta Health. I definitely want to dive into that, but I got to hear more about this rowing expedition with your wife first. I mean, they sent me your one sheet, and one of the headlines was you rowed with your wife for 45 days straight from San Diego to Hawaii, man. What was that like?
Well, first of all, I have to give credit to my wife, Meredith, to whom I'm still married, but it was quite a life experience. We indeed hopped into a rowboat unsupported from California in the summer of 2014. And people always ask, like, whoa, did you have a helicopter following or something when you were rowing from California to Hawaii, which is it's about 2,400 nautical miles. So we ended up rowing 2,700 nautical miles. And the answer is no helicopters, no follow boats. But yeah, we did that. It was 45 days and 3 hours. So it was quite a trip, and still married to the same woman. And it was life-changing, I would say, life transformed.
What was the motivation for doing that? Did you just wake up one day and said, okay, we're going to do something extreme and this is it?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there is an element of desire for adventure to some extent. And, I've been an athlete all my life, and I love pushing my limits, and so does my wife. I think that was one part of it. But then a second part of it was we wanted to raise awareness around dangers of sugar and poor nutrition. And specifically, the thinking was, which we then executed, the thinking was that we want to show kids that you don't need sugar and Gatorade and all this sports foods crap to exercise even at the high level and perform at the high level. Suddenly, if you play basketball for 30 minutes, you don't need to drink 300 calories of sugar to do that. So we wanted to show that we can exercise 16 to 18 hours per day. By the way, the 16 to 18 hours a day that we were rowing each day for 45 days, it's about the same amount of work in terms of calories burned as running 2 marathons each day. So we wanted to show that you can do that much work at a high level with absolutely no sugar and carbs, really, for almost 2 months nonstop. And so that was the element. So we raised money for charity and some research organizations that were basically promoting this idea that sugar is bad for you for the most part, and you can be healthy and even perform at a high level without it.
So what was like the specifics of the actual rowing? Like what the boat consist of? Like how did you sleep? Like you had to sleep at some point. Like what's the mechanics there?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was about a 6-7 meter, 20-foot or so boat made out of carbon fiber. And 2 people could be rowing at the same time on the deck. And then you could sort of sleep under the deck with an not airproof, but waterproof cabin, if you will, to sleep. And our basic routine was 16 to 18 hours of rowing, of which about 12 hours together. And then one was sleeping 6 hours and the other one was rowing through night or whatever. And then we would switch and the other one sleep 6 hours. So that's what we repeated for 45 days, 3 hours. That was the setup. And all the food was packed, vacuum sealed, and we can talk about what we ate, but basically real food. No sugar, no carbs, or very limited carbs. And then water, because you need a lot of that, both sweating and a little bit cleaning. We mainly desalinated from the ocean water, because otherwise you can do the math, 45 days, 2 people, you end up having, probably like 1,000 pounds or something like that of water. So we were able to desalinate from the ocean water.
That's wild, man. Like what do you Did y'all like talk the majority of that time, or were y'all just like in your zone, just going through the motions? Like I would imagine at 45 days rowing alongside your spouse, like you gotta be pretty close to your spouse to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, about 12 hours per day, we would row at the same time. So there was a lot of time to talk about different types of topics. And, we pulled random things out of thin air, like, well, if you were president of the United States, how would you produce world peace? And like literally those kinds of topics. And then there was a one question my wife asked, which unfortunately I answered because, we were trying to fill the time and while rowing and questions, some funny, some less. And the question she asked me, she said, if it wasn't me, which one of our friends would you marry?
Oh, you answered
I
that question.
thought of
That's
it for a little
dangerous.
bit, and then, of course, I entered the trap and answered that question. So anyways, there were all kinds of topics. That was one that if I could go back, I probably wouldn't answer.
Was there any point during that 45-day span where y'all were both like totally over it, like let's just not continue, or were y'all like committed from the get-go and never wavering?
Yeah, I think quite honestly, the first 10 to 14 days, so almost 2 weeks, were the hardest. And they were hardest for really two reasons. One was it was so stormy and probably, I'd say, maybe 10, 7 meter, like 25-foot waves. So first of all, it was very stormy. And Pacific Ocean, it's not dolphins and rainbows. It's actually very cold, the Northern Pacific Ocean particularly. So that was one. It was stormy, kind of cloudy, a little bit rainy, and very, very cold all the time. So that was one reason in the first 2 weeks. It was really scary, quite honestly. And then the second reason was that the wind was coming more or less from a west or northwest. So here's what happened. For the first 10 days, we made practically zero westerly progress towards Hawaii. We just ended up all the way to Mexico. And the place where we pushed off actually was Monterey, California. So kind of on a northern part of California. So we just went down for about almost 2 weeks. And I told my wife, I said, we made like less than 10 miles off the 2000 plus to west. We just made, I don't know, hundreds of miles south. We're going to run out of food. This is just not going to happen. And I would have given up if it wasn't for my wife, who I guess was more stubborn and said, hey, even if we just make an inch a day, we just keep going at it. And eventually kind of the storms calmed down a little bit and the wind became sort of northerly, northwesterly. So we were able to scoop. And so if you look at the route that we ended up rowing, it was like straight down first. And then slowly but surely we started making progress towards west, towards Hawaii, and we made it. But I'd say that was a moment. And then many hard moments where I was about to give up. And then over the time, I did learn many life mantras that have been useful ever since. One was, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
Shall pass. And there's many moments you're like, there's no way I can, this is it. And then you realize hour or day or 2 days later, it's like, well, remember that thing. And here we are 2 days later, we still keep going. And then the other was, you have to, the ultimate way to overcome pain, literally physical pain, which, taking 1,000,000 OR strokes over 45 days is kind of physical pain all the time, is you absolutely give in to the feeling. You surrender.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're mental, like, oh my God, 4 more weeks and then we can sleep in a bed or take a shower or get real food. It's misery, right? But when you surrender and say, this is it, here we are, just embrace it, you can pretty much get through anything. So
There's like a certain piece with that, man. Like when I did my last competition prep, that was the first prep I'd ever done where I also surrendered. And it was the best prep I'd ever had because there wasn't this like negative connotation around everything that I was doing. I wasn't as bitter. I wasn't as irritable, but like there's so much peace and power that comes from just surrendering to the elements and just taking it as it comes. Like as strange as that sounds, it's kind of counterintuitive, but there's strength in that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I do a lot of sports, particularly cycling, training and racing. It's an example. You may do hard intervals and, it's painful. And if you allow your mind to be like, oh my God, this is horrible. It's kind of like people can maybe relate to, like, if you jump into cold water, 9 people out of 10, the reaction is you start screaming and I can't wait to get out of this and horrible and then I don't know, 1 out of 10, you surrender and you just accept it. It's just cold. It's just freezing cold. And if you
Mm-hmm.
surrender and you be calm, you can pretty much kind of get through anything. But it is a very good point that you mentioned.
Did you have any like experience in the ocean, like navigation? Like, how did you learn all that stuff? Like, have you been sailing before, or what was the experience there?
Yeah, well, I'm sure this sounds crazy, but I had absolutely no rowing experience, no ocean experience, no navigating experience, no experience of any kind being in the ocean or middle of the ocean, which was part of the intrigue, quite honestly. And I didn't mention earlier the place from where I kind of personally discovered that, hey, the ocean is kind of a special place, was the book Unbroken by Laura Hillebrand. And
Mm-hmm.
this was a movie made just around the time we wrote about this book Unbroken, where it's Second World War. Air Force folks were shot down by the Japanese, and they fell into the Pacific, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and then they drifted in a lifeboat kind of through the Pacific Ocean, and that story and all those kind of descriptions got me very excited about this idea that, hey, maybe there could be a way to cross the Pacific Ocean, and got me kind of excited that what is out there. What is out there in reality is a lot of empty space. Let me tell you,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of empty space. But there are very, very special things, whether that's the phosphorescence, like you, in the middle of the night, you take your oil strokes and you just see, like in the Disney movie, sparkles going in the ocean, some whales and sharks following. And I would say probably the most mind-blowing experience, I thought I had seen it, but I had not. When you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and you look at the night sky, in no kidding, I'm pretty sure we saw 10,000 times more stars than I've ever seen, even in the mountains or in the wilderness. It was like completely white because there's so much
Wow.
light pollution in basically anywhere else in the world. So it is a very special environment, at least from my N=1 kind of experience. But back to
That's
your question, I'll just quickly mention. So I had absolutely no experience before ocean. So it was sort of from zero to ready in 6 months. Training, rowing, survival courses. We took a lot of the same courses that sailors take with U.S. Coast Guard, navigation, how to use radio. Because if you just push off and go and sort of try to get through an ocean, you'll probably die. Like, you have to learn a lot of things, and big boats go, and how do you communicate with them, and how do you use the survival equipment, and so it was basically a full-time job, 6 months to get ready to potentially cross the Pacific and survive.
That's wild, man. My parents, so we sail a lot in my family. My parents just bought a boat to sail around the world, and like they retired 2 years ago, and they're going to sail around the world, which is super awesome. I'm excited to link up with them at various ports.
Yeah.
But there's something special about being on the water, man. It's a totally different beast than what most people are accustomed to on land.
Absolutely. And I often say there's a reason there's 2 words. There's a lake and an ocean. And yes, they both have water, but they're 2 completely different animals.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So, what was the motivation for doing it all without carbohydrates and sugar? Like, I can totally resonate with that. Like, I'm in bodybuilding space. Like, what I'm trying to do with the ketogenic approach is far counter to what everybody else is doing. And I'm a big advocate for being fat fueled and not relying on glucose. It's not necessary to compete at a high level in performance sports without carbohydrates. So where did the catalyst for that come for you? Like, what was the motivation?
Yeah, well, there's kind of a longer arc, but I'm a kid of a child of 1980s and 90s, and I am kind of, my mind is wired in a way that when somebody tells me to do something, I do that times 100. And so I'm a kid of 80s, 90s, and I was always told fat's bad, cholesterol is bad, and low-fat dogma and kind of lived and grew through that, effectively then avoiding all the possible fat I can. And simultaneously throughout my life, I've been, an endurance athlete and performed pretty well. To the point that when I came to America, I started doing triathlons, and I won the world championships in my age group in triathlon. I did the Hawaii Ironman World Championships 7 times back to back, and as a recreational athlete, was very fast. Like people know Ironmans. Back in the days, my fastest time was 8 hours 24 minutes, which is like very fast for an amateur. Now these days, it's not like Olympic gold medal level, but anyways, fast amateur. The reason
Pretty
I picked
impressive.
that is I thought I was very, very healthy. I'm eating out as I'm supposed to eat. And then I discovered that I'm pre-diabetic and on my way to type 2 diabetes, despite being like a lean single percent, body fat, running all these triathlons. And I was like, what the F? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, if I'm getting unhealthy and metabolically sick, if I'm getting metabolic disease, everyone's getting metabolic disease because I'm doing all the right things. Well, sure enough, everyone is getting metabolic disease in America and most developed nations. So that kind of led me to a path of discovery, like, how can a guy in his early 30, mid 30s, I guess, eating healthy, exercising 10 plus hours of cardio a week, become metabolically unhealthy? This doesn't make absolutely any sense. And so that sort of led me to read a lot of research and books. And eventually I became convinced that it's the fucking carbs. If you marinate your body, your brain, your blood sugar constantly into blood sugar spikes, probably 9 people out of 10 or 19 out of 10 will develop metabolic disease. There's probably a small percentage of people who basically do anything and nothing happens. But given, I guess, 60+% of American adults now have either type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, if you take early insulin resistance, probably 70%. Basically, one can be made sick. So that kind of led me to this discovery, I guess, if you will, and belief at the time. But now the data is so strong, like there's not much belief needed. If you marinate your body, your blood sugar in excess, blood sugar, carbohydrates, long enough, practically everyone becomes metabolically unhealthy. And how do you fix that? Well, you shouldn't be fixing food with drugs. You should fix bad food with better food. And I was like, okay, well, that's it. Let's try to do something about it.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree. There's a lot of people in the evidence-based community that are totally of the opinion that you can consume carbohydrates. It's more of a mixed diet approach. You just got to control for total caloric intake. And if you're not exceeding that, then there's no reason why one should not consume carbohydrates. What do you say to that pushback?
Well, I think, I was a lean athlete who clearly wasn't in excess calories because, I'm also a physicist by training, started my career in a nuclear power plant. So I believe in the first and second law of thermodynamics, which is calories in, calories out. And so my answer to that is that, well, N equals 1, first myself. I certainly wasn't eating excess calories relative to my burn because I kept my body fat fixed. And let me tell you, that was a lot of hard work because you're hunger and cravings all the time and you're just restricting. Yet I was still becoming metabolically unhealthy. So that's me. And now we should probably put links into the studies, but there's been bunch of studies among like 30, 40-year-olds recreational triathletes who exercise a lot, are relatively lean, and like large percentage of these people today have pre-diabetes. And as I've shared my story, so many people have reached out to me, and it's not like I'm promoting it everywhere, but it's online. Anyone can read my kind of story on how I ended up now starting my current company, Virta Health. So many people have reached out to me who are like, I can't believe this. I'm 33. I'm doing all this exercise. I'm running a 3-hour marathon, whatever. And it's just the blood work, and I'm pre-diabetic. My A1C is up and this and that. So my answer is, this is happening to millions of people. Like, they think they're lean, they think they're doing the right thing, yet they're metabolically unhealthy. Their blood sugar is up, fasting insulin is up, their triglycerides are up, their inflammation with the CRP or white blood cell counts are up. Like, how's that possible? It's not just keeping your full calorie intake. I'm sure if you also gain excess fat on top of that, because adipose tissue is inflammatory, it probably makes things even worse. But there's just so many people out there who may have kind of lean body composition, but they're still metabolically completely unhealthy. So I don't think it's just, weight gain. It's
Yeah.
associated, but the weight gain is not the kind of binary factor, whether you're metabolically unhealthy or not.
No, I totally agree.
I'll say one more thing, actually. This is even better. And before we go into my current company, Virta Health, we treat a lot of patients. Most of them are like BMI 35, 40 plus. And so we can reverse type 2 diabetes, so get people's blood sugar down to normal level and completely off of diabetes medications. Absolutely before substantial amount of body weight, body fat is lost, which implies that metabolic health may be associated with excess body fat, but you can take a metabolically unhealthy person, make them metabolically pretty healthy before they lose a lot of weight. And then also vice versa, you can have a lean person who's very metabolically unhealthy. So it's not just the calories in, calories out, for sure.
No, 100%. Do you think there's a, like some people want to consume carbohydrates, but they're consuming more, single ingredient, naturally occurring carbohydrates, fibrous foods, vegetables, natural fruits, things of that nature. Do you think they're at the same risk as someone that's consuming a lot more sugar and hyperpalatable processed foods? Like, do you think the type of carbohydrate is a main contributing factor? Or is it just carbohydrates in general that's leading to this metabolic syndrome?
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on the internet, and try to always be very evidence based. And quite honestly, I don't know fully. I would say, so I don't want to make any conclusive statements, but I would say the following: whatever has made you, say, insulin resistant today, if you're in your 30s or 40s, meaning you have elevated fasting blood glucose and overall glucose, A1C, and fasting insulin, I think you can tolerate very little excess carbohydrates in any form. And I know this for 100% a fact, because we treat people with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes. Their body is already at the state, so insulin resistant, that oatmeal for most people is completely out of question, or like, I don't know, dehydrated fruits. So if you are very insulin resistant at that point, you've kind of lost the game already. Like, you really have to go and almost all, not all carbohydrates, but like any excess amount in any form is kind of out of the question. Now, if you go to a 15-year-old child who is very insulin sensitive and they're metabolically very healthy and metabolically very flexible, if they eat wholesome food and no excess added sugar and no sodas and no juices, they can probably handle that for a long, 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 long time. And some people maybe forever. So I think it's very contextual in where you are. But if your body is already insulin resistant, it's almost like amber, and any carbs is like dried wood, and it just starts a fire. So that's kind of how I see it. But again, I will say I'm no doctor, so they don't take this as medical advice, and then also try to be always very evidence-based. And so this is more of a anecdotes, but that's kind of how I see it. That's why it's also tough to say blanket statements like, oh, all the fruits are bad. Well, probably not for every person. But again, if you're very insulin resistant, you're type 2 diabetic, eating apples all day long is not going to be good for you, sadly.
Totally. I'm a big advocate for sustainability, obviously, with any dietary protocol. I've been doing keto now for over a decade, and I feel like that's optimal. That's why I do it. But there's a lot of people that have given pushback to long-term keto, long-term carnivore, for fear that it decreases metabolic flexibility by way of increasing insulin resistance. And I was trying to point out the difference between pathological and physiological insulin resistance. But do you have any thoughts towards that?
Well, I have my N=1 anecdotal personal experience. And then, we have data from our patients. I think the qualitative thoughts, I would say, whatever keeps you healthy, keep doing that. And what we do with our patients, again, somebody may have had type 2 diabetes for 15 years. They're on insulin. We can reverse that in, I don't know, maybe 6 months. They're completely off of insulin. And then they are following certain type of maintenance lifestyle nutritionally. And whatever that is that keeps them off of diabetes medications, blood sugar low and lipids low and everything, lipids at the right level and everything's good. Like, that's what you should be doing. If the alternative is to go back to develop type 2 diabetes again, why the heck would you do that? And none of our patients would want to do. Like, they feel awesome, they have energy, they're off the drugs, and they're like, I can't believe I lived with type 2 diabetes for 10 years and here I'm off. So anyone arguing like, well, but you should be eating the bad stuff so you'd be more flexible. That's ridiculous,
Yeah,
right?
I
It's
agree.
not to take a perfect example. This is not a perfect analogy, but I grew up in Finland. The Scandinavians have a lot of lactose intolerance. Like, I don't really eat lactose. Maybe ate cheese, but I'm not going to drink a glass of milk because my stomach's going to be messed up. So I just stop eating milk or drinking milk unless it's lactose free. Like, why would I make myself feel miserable? So anyone telling me 5 years in, like, but I think you'd be more flexible if your body was used to lactose. Well, maybe, but listen, feeling freaking awesome. I don't want to be messing up my stomach by eating or drinking 3 glasses of milk. And so I think that's one thing I'll mention there. Then just personally, anecdotally, I probably followed pretty similar nutrition approach to you since 2013. So how many years? It's 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I also race bicycles, again, sort of recreationally. And I'm in my late 40s, and I objectively am fitter than I've ever been in my life. Because sometimes people say, oh, if you don't eat lots of sugar and carbs, you certainly can't perform on a high intensity level. And cycling is kind of like lifting weights. You have power meters, so you can get a number of watts and how much you lift weights, the pounds. Like, there is no fuzziness around it. Like, you've got a number. It's not feeling. And I don't know, I can perform at a better level than I ever have. And then if I need to eat carbohydrates for some big 5-hour bike race, my body is just perfectly fine processing them. So that is my N=1 anecdote, which doesn't make science, so I'm not going to write a book about it. But I don't know.
I think it's valid though. I mean, I feel like people that are doing athletic, high performance endeavors, whether it be cycling or lifting weights or rowing 45 days straight. I mean, that's a pretty good test to the nutrition and how you're able to perform. So like when you're doing a cycling event, for instance, like how are you fueling? Like, are you strategically timing certain carbs? Are you having any of the goo packets that they're typically seen on cycle runs? Like how does that look for you when you're doing an event?
Yeah, I'd say, but by the way, I'm sometimes hesitant to talk about very specific personal nutrition because people usually take it out of context and this and that. But I will share a few things. I'd say generally in my life outside of hard workouts and racing, endurance racing, I don't really touch any visible carbohydrates. Now I eat a lot of salads and this and that, but those are very low carbohydrate
Mm-hmm.
level. Nothing, no rice, no pasta, no bread, no wheat, no nothing. And then when I do very hard workouts, so I would say very low carbohydrate levels outside of any of those. And then in like some races and hard workouts, during it, I just take whatever fast carbohydrates I can take. And that's how I've learned to optimize my performance. And, the body, when you're burning, let's just see, 1,200 calories an hour, you can throw a couple of 100 calories of carbs per hour and they disappear and doesn't affect your metabolic health and life is good. So that's kind of how I've optimized. So I don't, like, if I do a 3-hour hard race or something, I don't do that fasted. I do find that whether that's psychologically or metabolically, it is helpful to have a little bit carbohydrates during.
Have you ever, or do you train like via like heart rate zone training? I just did a VO2 max for the first time like 2 weeks ago, so I'm kind of intrigued by that style of training based off of heart rate, and VO2 capacity. So like when you're going through a training block for a cycling event, like how are you structuring your training leading up to that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I look at sort of three things for levels. It's heart rate, and then cycling is an objective output measure of power. Watts, like how much power the bike your body's producing and putting through the bike, and then perceived effort. Those are the three, and then you could measure lactate levels, which obviously tells a lot as well, which I've done sometimes. But basically, it's those three: perceived effort, heart rate, and then and power. And then I have certain types of intervals, easy rides and sort of medium tempo, and then some super hard stuff. But I use those three in combination. Ultimately, physiologically, it all comes down to perceived effort, because if you just cannot go faster, it doesn't matter what's your heart rate number or what's your power number. Like, that's max. And also, if you want to do a hard workout, but not too hard that you recover the next day, you still have to listen to your perceived effort. So I would say, despite being very mathematically and quantifiably oriented, me as a person, I use perceived effort probably more than anything else as the measure. And I've also noticed that in training, similar to perceived effort, how you feel, like when you wake up in the morning, for example, is the best proxy for recovery and performance. And I've used every HRV, resting heart rate, a number of other things for like a recovery. But how you feel is incredibly accurate. And I believe it's because we already have the best recovery machine, or recovery scoring machine, and that's called brain. Like, if you have like a sickness coming and no number has moved, guess what knows that? Your brain and your body. Like, I don't know, I'm so sluggish, I'm so tired. And a day later you have a sore throat, and a day later then you're in a bed. And so I found that despite all the quantified self and all the data that you can have, it's incredibly important to be aware how you're feeling for
Yeah, no,
sports.
I totally agree. I'm very data-based, analytical as well, with like tracking all my macros and training stats. But I've got the wearable on my arm. But man, there's so much to be said for just being in tune with your body, having mind-muscle connection, being aware of how you're feeling upon waking. If you need a recovery, training intuitively based off of how you're feeling. And I feel like with the popularity of a lot of these wearables and data metrics, a lot of people are less in tune with their body than ever. So like marrying both of those together is the key that we should all strive for.
Could not agree more.
So peel the curtain back on Virta Health, man. Talk to me about the origin story of that, and what exactly the protocol is and who all that serves.
Yeah, well, it ties back to a lot of the things that I already said, what led into the role. But let me just give you the snapshot. So Virta Health is the company where I'm the CEO and co-founder, and our stated mission is to reverse metabolic disease, starting from type 2 diabetes and obesity, in 1 billion people. So reverse metabolic disease in 1 billion people. And we achieve that 100% exclusively with nutrition. And we deliver this treatment purely through lifestyle change. So we don't sell any food or anything. And we do it 100% virtually. So we have full-time employees who are doctors, full-time employees who are coaches. And then, of course, we use a lot of software and algorithms to individualize and support our patients to reverse their metabolic disease, again, nutritionally. So that's what we do. In terms of how this came about, it goes back to my story of how did I get interested in nutrition, how did this role came about, and kind of the one moment that kind of changed my interest or redirected my focus and interest was when I discovered that I was metabolically unhealthy and pre-diabetic, despite being a world-class triathlete, at least as an amateur. And I did the role and obviously learned a lot myself. And then I said, this is ridiculous. We have 150 million plus people in America who are metabolically unhealthy. And again, the best that humanity can offer is prescribing drugs to treat symptoms, as opposed to reverse these reversible conditions. Nearly 40 million people have diabetes. dialysis, kidneys popping, losing eyesight, people losing limbs, people dying from diabetes. And this is a freaking reversible condition. And so I said, I can talk all day long. I can do these roles and bring awareness and raise money for nonprofits. But if I can build a company that has a very specific solution to do just that, to reverse metabolic disease, it's probably the fastest way to actually have impact in the world. And I am a huge believer that if you have the right mission, the right approach, and the right product, a for-profit company and the American capitalistic system is the best tool for change.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Of the reasons why companies work. And so I said, let's freaking go and build this company, Virta Health, to solve metabolic disease more broadly. And so that was about 11 years ago. And we spent a good sort of 5 years in clinical trial mode. We actually run a large scale prospective clinical trial. It took a long time to build the platform and make sure we can treat patients remotely, successfully, safely, and do it cost effectively. And now fast forward today, we're still a privately held company. We raised $360 million of investor money to build the company. We have a couple of $100 million in revenues. So like a large startup, but small, big company, growing more than 80% year over year. And we work with more than 600 payers or plan sponsors. So we work with large employers like United Airlines or U-Haul, health plans like Blue Shield of California, government entities like the Veterans Administration, some state, municipal, city, government organizations who pay the treatment, and then individual patients have free access. And we are I think we are less than 1,000 employees, but somewhere pretty close there. So that's what we've been doing. And quite honestly, we've come a long way, and it's sort of a decent scale, but this is no joke. Like it's still just day one. And it's just day one because the magnitude of this problem it's insane. Like it is just like America, I don't know if your listeners know how big these numbers are. America spent, just America alone, $4.5 trillion a year in healthcare. So it's almost 20% of our GDP. That's way more than military education and anything combined. And by the way, it's twice as much per capita as anywhere else in the country, in the world, whether that's Switzerland or Finland. So $4.5 trillion. Easily about half of that, so $1 to $2 trillion at least, goes to addressing metabolic disease. And mostly, it's just addressing the end complications like dialysis and heart attacks or prescribing meds to treat symptoms. So what I want to do is say, this is ridiculous. Enough of this bullshit. Like we can reverse most of these conditions. We can save so much taxpayer money. We can save so much money for the economy. And most importantly, we can kind of give people their lives back. And the typical kind of a patient we treat at Virta is they're somewhere between 55 and I'd say 55 years of old, kind of average. We have men and women both, a little bit more women. People are sort of 50 to 80 pounds overweight, and they've had diabetes for many years. Like they literally think this is it. I'm not going to see my grandkids alive. I've been on insulin for 10 years. Like my doctor keeps telling me, type 2 diabetes, chronic and progressive. Let's just keep piling more drugs so we kind of slow down the progression. And then we show up and say, hey, this is ridiculous. We can reverse that in 3 to 9 months. You get off of insulin likely. Let's go. And on average, that's what happens. And so it's still day one, but we make good progress. And honestly, professionally, it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life to be able to, slight exaggeration, like pulling people out of their graves and say, let's go. It's awesome. And to be paid for that, and it's a win for the patient, obviously. It's a win for whoever pays the healthcare bills, their employer or an insurance company, because they save money. And, it's a win for Virta as a company, because obviously we get paid for the service. So it's been quite a journey.
No, it's awesome, man. That is incredibly fulfilling, I would imagine, for sure. Why do you think, especially in our capitalistic, country, why are there not other companies doing this? Why is the government not doing this? Like you would think everybody would save so much more money, but that has not been the case.
Well, I will say I'm cautiously optimistic. This is not bragging, but it was an honor. I was at the White House last week um, um, with folks like Dr. Oz, who runs Medicare, and we were invited to go there because the government wants to do this. They want
That's good.
to lower Medicaid costs. They want people to be healthy. They want better experience for the beneficiaries. Now, obviously, working with governments, it's always complex and takes a long time and this and that. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're moving towards a better direction. But more fundamentally to your question, why the heck are we here? Like, why why are we dealing with these metabolic diseases and treating them on a symptoms level as opposed to solving them? And why did this kind of spiral out of control? That is a good question. I don't think there was an evil master plan behind it, but we've ended up in a situation where all the entities that make money off of this problem are big, fat, and happy. And there's no incentive. And what do I mean by that? Literally, this is what's happening today in America and most of the country, including my native Finland now. Left hand is feeding bad food that's making you unhealthy. And it's very high profit margin, processed crap with lots of sugar and carbs. Left hand is feeding that. And the right hand is feeding or giving very expensive drugs that barely keep you alive so that you can eat more of this crap with your left hand. It's a completely vicious cycle. That's kind of where we are. And so we're kind of stuck. The food companies make a lot of money feeding you food that's making you sick. And then you have this healthcare ecosystem that makes a lot of money treating symptoms to barely keep you alive. That's kind of where we are. And then this broader healthcare, like in the US, it's mostly based on fee for service. So when you have a heart attack, guess who makes money? The hospital makes a ton of money and the surgeon makes a ton of money. When you have dialysis, which is, at the end of type 2 diabetes, usually your kidneys pop up and you have to go dialysis. It's ridiculously expensive. And there's companies that make a lot of money from that. So we have this whole system of like maintaining this problem. And very few companies, hopefully Virta will be one of them, is coming kind of from outside and say, like, blow the whistle and say, this is effing ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense. Like,
Yeah, I would
let's
think
stop this stupidity and solve this problem. And hopefully we are on our way there.
Yeah, I understand that everybody profiting in that regard, but I would think from a business model long-term standpoint, like all of your paying customers are going to die. That's probably not the best thing long-term for anybody.
Well, this is why we have made amazing progress, because we go to the plan sponsors, again, employers, Fortune 500 employers. We work with 500 plus employers, not Fortune 5, maybe it's Fortune 1000, but anyways, big names, UPS, United Airlines, US Foods, like this, the household names, FedEx, big employers. They love us. Why do they love us? Because it makes freaking common sense. We make their employees healthy and we save them money. And they are desperate. Like, the cost of healthcare in America is ridiculous and employers pay largely. So they love us. And that's why the economic model is such that we go to the folks who pay the healthcare bills and say, hey, we'll come in, we can make your employee healthy, you save money, and you pay us less than you save. So everybody wins. And we also in our contracts, we have 100% downside risk. We say, if it doesn't work, you pay nothing. If it doesn't work, you pay nothing. And by the way, this is how healthcare should be. Like, if we don't make you healthy, you pay nothing. But obviously, that's not how the healthcare is mostly. It's like, come here, we'll give you some pills and some interventions, and we bill you every time we do, whether it works or not. So that's where the pressure is. People who write checks for healthcare, who actually pay the bills, which is largely employers and taxpayers, by the way, they are sick and tired of doing that. And that's why our business model is to go to them and say, we'll help you make money and make your people healthier. It's still not easy. Obviously, it's very, very hard because everything's very hard. But I do think we have the right approach to kind of parachute in, do the right thing while helping people make money in the process.
Well, it makes sense to me. It seems like a much more viable solution long term, especially. What does it look like for the patients? So, like, if somebody, like, do individuals come to you directly as well to work through Virta, or is it through their sponsored healthcare plan?
It is both. Like, anyone can, like, if you have a listener, and hopefully this doesn't sound on marketing because it's not a major focus, but if you're like, oh my God, my family member is suffering from diabetes, you can go to virtahealth.com and literally sign up, and if your insurance or employer doesn't cover yet, obviously we're working on that, you can pay with your credit card. So anyone can come directly, like any doctor's office. But in the case of a health plan or employer who covers Virta, it's very simple. We send information to them and say, hey, your employer covers this diabetes reversal or weight loss treatment. And you can go here, go to virtahealth.com, and then it's like a doctor's office, but online. You leave your health history, and then you have pretty soon a telemedicine visit with one of our doctors, Virta doctors, who are full-time employees of the Virta Medical Group. And then you have that, we kind of see your blood work, and if you're okay to join, usually you are, then we send you a starter kit to your home that has all the tools that are needed to track your biomarkers remotely, because we need to know that both for safety to de-prescribe medications, so we get your blood glucose, blood ketones, weight, blood pressure, both for safety and then also to individualize the treatment. Like, as you probably know very well, from your biomarkers, you can kind of figure out what you've been eating right or wrong pretty well. And then our coaches who interface through the app, so digitally, support and problem solve and give basically daily guidance to our patients, like what to change, what not to change, and then basically guide the person towards better health, reversing diabetes, so sustainably lose weight. That's kind of the approach.
And I'm assuming it's more or less low carb, ketogenic, something that's going to minimize blood sugar volatility. How do you deal with adherence, like getting the patients, especially if it's all done remotely? Like, how do you incentivize or ensure adherence on their part with the foods they're consuming?
Yeah. Well, yeah, obviously food is kind of almost like a religion and very personal, everything. So you have to individualize everything, like 100%. And I often use this kind of silly example that if someone's vegan by sort of core and identity, you tell them to have bacon for breakfast, you lose them immediately. It's just like, try to change a vegan who believes that's their identity. Or maybe you're a vegetarian by religion, like, we can't tell you to have bacon for breakfast. A silly example. Goes the other way around as well. If you're like, I've been eating burgers all my life, that's my thing, like, tell them to become a vegetarian. It's not going to happen. So individualization is key. But to your question about adherence, the truth is that while we fine-tune our nutrition science protocol a ton, obviously over the last 10 years, treating hundreds of thousands of patients in America, the nutrition science is 100 years old. Like, it's 100 years old. Like, we read all in like early 20th century. It's like, oh my God, there's like how to treat people with type 2 diabetes. A lot of the details are there. Like, oh, you reduce carbohydrates here and do this and that. It's 100 years old. So what's missing? What largely has been missing to have impact at scale before Virta was, how do you deliver and individualize this type of treatment? And like you said, ensure adherence cost effectively. And you could say, well, let's assign nutritionists to every patient they follow and they kind of handhold. Is it obviously you can't do that because it's not scalable, it's too expensive. So we've used basically technology to solve that problem. And the kind of visual that I use is we try to make you as a patient feel and experience as if the world's best doctor and nutritionist was in your pocket 24/7. Like, anything you need, you have a kid's birthday, you take a picture, either AI or our coach gives advice like, oh, what should you eat or somebody else's birthday? Or you go to a restaurant, like, you have no idea menu, like, what should you eat? Or the week's coming, you have business travel, you're not quite sure how do you solve, or you feel this or that, or your biomarkers are off, what's wrong, we'll problem solve. So there's no one sentence punchline of this is how we solve adherence. It's been honestly quite trial and error, but without technology and to be able to digitally kind of 24/7 support and individualize, 0% chance we could do what we do at scale. Yeah. Of course, you know, there's Robert, there's Sami, there's always the, like, right, the 1% or 5% or 10% where you're like, let me give you a couple of tips, and then off they go and they're super successful for the rest of their lives. That's not average. So right. to deliver impact results on average, then you need to have all the bells and whistles that we built. But yeah, it's never easy. That work never ends. We are like constantly improving the protocol and the software. And as we expand to different larger and larger group of population, there's always something new we learn.
Well, I feel like a lot of, I mean, just in clients that I've worked with, like they're typically coming to me because they have a specific goal and they're willing to, adopt my protocol to reach it. But like the general population is trying to get healthy, reverse type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Like they just are very, I mean, a lot of them, they don't even know what a carbohydrate is. Like they can look at a plate of food and not be able to differentiate the different macronutrients. So like if they're able to take a picture and then your software can tell them what to eat and what to avoid, like I would assume that would solve a vast array of questions for people right there.
You're right. You're right. Food is just, it's both simple and complex. I've said this that, I studied physics, I worked in a nuclear power plant, but making nutrition work for the average person and solving that sort of adherence and individualization, it is harder than nuclear physics because it's simple in concept, but then in practice, it's like there's almost like thousands of micro decisions per day for each patient. Like everyone's situation is different. And then you get fired from your job, you're depressed. And then, what happens? Like, give me the cookie box. Like, how do you, and just so many different moms, dads, kids, although we don't treat kids, but it's just it's so complicated. That's why food is way harder to implement than a pill. Like you don't have to just remember to take the pill so many times. Now, I'm not saying treating symptoms with a drug is the solution, but to deploy a drug is way easier. It's very standardized. And that's why food is it's many orders of magnitude more complex.
And it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's only in this species, though, the human species. Like you look at any other animal in the wild, they all know what a species appropriate diet is. They just consume that. They're all able to maintain a healthy weight until human intervention comes into play.
Yeah.
But like humans, there's so much psychology involved. Like they've got their societal norms, they've got their preferences, they've got their dislikes and likes and celebrations, and there's just so much noise in the equation.
Yeah. Well, listen to this. Imagine if someone had told you 100 years ago, let's say you were living 1925. It's like Industrial Revolution, kind of very basic. Imagine if someone had told you then, 1925, that after 100 years of progress, so today, 100 years of progress, science and medicine, let me tell you, the multi-billion-dollar companies 100 years from now will teach us humans how to sleep well, how to eat well, how to move, and how to deal with our own brains and thoughts so we don't go crazy like meditation stuff. You would have said, you out of your mind. Like this is 1925. This is all common sense. And you're telling me after 100 years of progress, people are making billions of dollars teaching people how to eat, how to sleep, how to move, and how not to go crazy in their own heads. Like you out of your mind. If that happens, I would call that backwards progress. And guess what? That is 100% fact today. Aura, sleep tracking, sleep coaching, sleep beds, this and that. Obviously, Virta, we are basically a healthcare nutrition company. There's bunch of, multi-billion-dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars revenue, like how to take care of your mind, meditation, and obviously this whole like how do you move and coaching and fitness industry is massive. But most of these things were absolute common sense. So what has changed over the last 100 years is kind of what you described. We've created a default living environment with food, with lights, with how we work, with everything. Our default living environment has nothing to do with how we evolved. Zero. Animals don't really have that problem unless you're a house cat or house dog. And guess what? House cats and house dogs have type 2 diabetes. It's true. I think both. I want to make sure I think it's both. I think cats are more likely, I don't remember which way it goes, but cats and dogs are obese and have type 2 diabetes. But anything that's kind of is not in our default living environment is, they are just fine. And humans used to be just fine. Now, obviously, we are kind of messed up.
Yeah, it's almost like the root cause of all this is just too many options, too much too much frivolity in the world. I mean, being able to have so many options and us gravitating towards what is easy has created this complex problem that's surrounded by hardship.
Yeah, yeah. And as much as I'm a capitalist, I'm a proud capitalist. I think capitalistic system is the best operating system humans have figured out so far. Absolutely. It also kind of can work sideways. Like if you can make money selling gambling and bad food and I don't know, drugs, alcohol, whatever to people, if you can make money, someone's going to make money, and that's going to pull you to the wrong direction. And so, you know, I'm not saying regulation is the ultimate solution, but when you can make money off of selling something that makes you feel good, but it's actually long-term bad for you. And we could go from cigarettes, alcohol, social media. Like there's just so many things that are very, very profitable for their creators and are absolutely objectively pulling people to the wrong direction. It's happening all over the place. And so, the capitalistic system can drive positive change, but it can also make a lot of money and drive negative change. And so,
Totally.
well, I'm proud that I feel that I could say with an open heart and very objectively that our mission and our way to make money is objectively making people better and healthy. And we only get paid if we make people healthy. And that's why listeners, if there's entrepreneurs, I would say harness the capitalistic system to make money to do good. And it's 100% possible. And I think you're doing the same. It's freaking awesome feeling when you build a successful business. It creates jobs, it creates value, it creates wealth. And every client you serve truly helps a human being live a better life. It's freaking awesome. It's ecstatic, I have to say. So,
it is incredibly fulfilling. And you can do so while maintaining your integrity and being able to lay your head down at night and feel good about yourself. Like that is like, there's no price that you can put on that.
100%. It's awesome. And it's like you wake up and you're like, I like working. It's cool to work and solve problems, to build things. And this machine that we're building and scaling is objectively doing good. It's not story and then behind the scenes we know that tobacco causes cancer. Like, no, we're actually making people healthy. It's freaking awesome.
100%, man. It is awesome. Do you have a take on like all the popularity that's come out lately with around Ozempic, the GLP-1s? Like what is your stance on that as it pertains to the patient demographic?
Yeah, no, it's been a huge part of kind of our conversation with our clients, and it's been actually a crazy tailwind for our business. Not because Virta makes money off of the drugs or prescribing drugs, but it's been a tailwind because employers and health plans and others are like, oh my God, we need to solve obesity, but just covering these drugs clearly isn't going to work because it's too expensive, we're losing money, and how do we responsibly address obesity and maybe cover these drugs? Come and help us. So it's been good for our business. In terms of my take, first I would say we can't solve bad nutrition with drugs. Like we just cannot solve bad nutrition with drugs. I will say that. Like that's sort of foundational thing. That's one. Secondly, at the same time, the GLP-1 class of drugs is a way better obesity and just to a large extent type 2 diabetes drug as well than the previous generation. Like any kinds of weight loss drugs in the previous generation had huge amount of side effects and they really weren't very effective, quite honestly. So relative to other drugs treating metabolic disease, the GLP-1s seem to have a way better like outcome and safety profile. So that's sort of a good thing. That's the second. And then thirdly, I would say, I think to address, again, metabolic disease led by type 2 diabetes and obesity, but the other symptoms of metabolic disease, we need a bag of tricks to do it at scale in America and elsewhere. And I think the bag of tricks largely involves, one is sort of evidence-based nutrition treatments like Virta. That should be the foundation. That should be the 80% solution. If that's not enough and doesn't work, yeah, let's use evidence-based pharmaceuticals. GLP-1s, probably one of the best, if not the best in that category. That should be there. And then maybe, just maybe, for 0.1% or 0.01%, maybe even something super invasive, like a bariatric surgery, maybe used for some, but that should be like the last resource. So I always think when you have a huge problem, like this idea that one thing's going to solve everything is just sort of silly. And so we always have to think of like the bag of tricks, but then be very clear what's the role of these different tricks in that bag. And this idea that some people are pushing like, oh my God, GLP-1s will solve metabolic disease. We just need to put them into tap water and get the price down is ridiculous. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. Again, we can't solve bad nutrition. We can't solve food or fix food with drugs. We're back into this left hand feeds bad food, right hand feeds some drugs that barely keep you alive, so you can eat more bad food. Meanwhile, the human body in the middle is rotting and everybody's making money around them. Like it's ridiculous. And so I'm excited and optimistic about GLP-1s within the category of drugs, particularly metabolic disease. But with this bigger picture of solving metabolic disease globally or nationally, they are one tool, and it's definitely not the tool, in my opinion. If you think it's the tool, you're missing the big picture.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We got to throw some weight training in that pie chart too, though. So that's got to take up some percentages.
Fair. And I should say, like, if anyone's like, well, is exercise useful or good for you? 100%. And for most people, in particular, the older you become, I would say making sure that you maintain, if not grow, your muscle mass is incredibly important and helpful. We tend to, in our Virta care, tend to deprioritize exercise, particularly early on, for evidence-based reasons, because people have been kind of told historically, like, oh, it's like if you have overweight and you're metabolically unhealthy, just exercise more and eat a little bit less. And all the evidence is pointing that, like, restoring your metabolic health and losing weight, exercise can actually be, particularly initially, can be very counterproductive. And so we usually introduce exercise after we've gotten someone who's very metabolically sick towards some metabolic health. And usually then the energy comes back and they lose some weight. They're like, oh, I could start walking. And what kind of resistance training could I be doing? And then we start to introduce. But it's never kind of, they're like, all right, you're 100 pounds overweight. You never exercise. Like, let's go to the gym. We don't start with that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, I think of like all of my aunts and uncles and grandparents that like totally fit the bill for who your ideal client would be. And it's like, they're not going to be receptive to me encouraging them to get a gym membership. Like they eat every single day. So let's like fix that routine habit. And if that habit has shifted in the right direction, that compound is going to have the biggest impact on moving the needle for sure.
Totally. 100%.
It's very cool, man. I think Virta Health is doing some awesome stuff. I've been following y'all for quite some time because y'all were involved in some of the first conferences that I was speaking at when I got into the space. So y'all have been around for quite some time and y'all are making a massive, meaningful impact. So what you're doing is truly amazing. And I just can't thank you enough, man. Like this is the kind of stuff that needs to be happening in the world at scale, like y'all are doing. So I'm optimistic about y'all's meeting to the White House, that they getting government involved and on board with it. I think that could be huge.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words. It's never easy, but step by step, making progress. And if any of your listeners like, hey, I'm in healthcare, health coaching, whatever. If you want a job, definitely ping us. We're growing fast and hiring, and spread the word. It doesn't have to be about Virta, but if I leave with a couple of thoughts, I would say one piece of message that everybody needs to hear, including doctors, is metabolic disease, particularly type 2 diabetes and obesity, is reversible sustainably, nutritionally. Like just that message is very, very important. It is possible with nutrition. That's sort of the one message. And then two, that there are places and companies that can help you with that. And again, it doesn't need to be Virta, but if we get those two things out, that metabolic disease, particularly diabetes, obesity, is and are reversible, I think we'll start to make progress, because way too many people don't know that. And sadly, many primary care doctors have no idea that type 2 diabetes is reversible. And they usually learn through our patients who happen to be their patient, who go back to an annual or quarterly checkup and say like, I'm off of insulin and my A1C is, 5.6 from 8.9. And then the primary care doctor goes, wait, I've never seen this in my career. What are you doing again? Like, what's going on here? And so just getting the word out there about metabolic disease and it being reversible, I think would help make some progress.
Plus, it's so, I mean, like the idea that it's not, that you're just genetically predestined to have type 2 diabetes, like that's how so many people think. And how hopeless is that? I mean, that's like, how could you be motivated to get out of bed every day? But like, if you believe that it is reversible based off of interventions that you can control completely with the food you put in your mouth, like
Totally.
that's empowering. It takes some ownership, it takes some sacrifice, it takes some, you know, work ethic, but that's
Yeah.
empowering.
Yeah, and I'll mention this. Hopefully, this highlights for those listeners who are like, "Well, I don't have type 2 diabetes." Like, sounds cool. Nutrition helps, sure, not that big of a deal. It is a huge deal for a person who's been living with type 2 diabetes for years, maybe decades, to reverse that and not travel through airports with insulin needles and sticking literally a needle into your body multiple times a day and feeling tired and having sleep apnea and whatever, men ED, and it's like a miserable existence. So I'll give you an example. I have this vest that says Virta and this our logo, this spark here. We have multiple patients who have permanently tattooed this Virta logo in their bodies after we reverse their type 2 diabetes, which to me is still mind blowing. But I think it goes to show that like these metabolic diseases are horrible. And when people get out of them, like it's like winning the lottery and getting their life back. Like it is that bad and good when you get out of it, I guess.
I feel like you got to get the tattoo, man. I mean, you're like the co-founder. Like you should have that tattoo.
You're not the first one to tell me that, and I think it's more of a when as opposed to if.
I like it. I like it. Well, I got one more question for you, Sami. What's the next cycling event or strenuous activity you've got planned for yourself personally?
That is a good question. Well, I do every weekend. I try to do some long rides, but well, I will answer this in a roundabout way. Tomorrow, as we are recording this on a Friday, there's the Leadville 100 mile mountain bike race in Colorado. I've done that the last couple of years, but not doing it this year. But I'll mention that as a inspirational event for anyone who's into endurance sports. I would highly recommend the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, and good luck to anyone who's doing it this year.
Nice, nice. So you've done that before in the past?
I've done it, including last year and the year before, and maybe 4 or 5 times.
Nice. Have you ever done the what is it, the RAM Race Across America?
Funny you asked. I have done RAM Race Across America one time in a 4-person team. So those of you who are listening, you know, it's from Oceanside, California to Maryland. So about 3,000 miles nonstop. If you're a 4-person team, obviously you do about 6 hours, 24 divided by 4, 6 hours a day each, and you rotate kind of nonstop. And we did it we won our category, but we didn't break the world record, but it was like 6 days and some hours. Amazing experience. And you see
That's
the whole
intense,
America,
man.
like you smell, you see, obviously you on the bike. But that's awesome. We did it a couple of years ago before COVID.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. Well, you're a stud. You're a beast. You're changing lives. Super inspirational, man. Keep doing what you're doing. And it's virtahealth.com for anybody that needs to dive in and learn more, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And thanks again for having me.
My pleasure, man. Well, if there's ever anything I could do, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Sami.